Hi there, it's Simone. Thank you so much for joining me for an up close and personal look at Sailor Manyo Akebi. This is an ink from Sailor. Was released, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in 2019. They released a first four inks in their Manyo series, and then in 2020 they released another four. And so far, all of the Manyo inks that I have tested have become fast favorites. I purchased a bottle of the Manyo Akebi last year in May, I think, after I had received a sample from my friend Amy and quickly fell in love with it. I am writing these samples on the left side of the journal page because the affirmations that I wrote on the right side when I first initially started this ink journal didn't do it for me. I would have wanted to see how the typeface would look in a paragraph, and so now I'm going back and adding these writing samples to each of the entries that I have already made. And I'm using a cookbook that my mom used. It's a reprint of a 1958. I'm not sure. I would have to look that up. It's old. And I will fill that up until, or use that for as transcribing tool to make those entries until I'm caught up. And for all the new entries that I'm starting, I am transcribing a different book. So that will finish when I'm caught up, which we don't know when that will be. So I think that's all the basics that you would need to know to what I'm doing here. If you want to know more about this ink journal that I'm using, I have a video on my channel here and I will link it in the description box below. And if I don't forget, it will be up in the cards so you can hear more about what I'm doing here. But let me quickly talk about the ink color. I would say, and that is probably, I haven't even thought about this before I started doing this series. We see colors differently. And so I see a medium purple, magenta. In this extra fine nib, it almost looks pink or magenta, fuchsia. That's lilac. This fountain pen color is called lilac, and I would say that it comes close, maybe not exactly, but it's definitely a purple. And it's a perfect purple for me. I love the hue, I love how it shades. I'm not 100% sure that I'm a person who enjoys sheening inks, but I'm not mad about this ink sheening. It has a goldish green sheen, and it comes out in almost every fountain pen nib size except for this extra fine nib. So maybe that is because instead of actually filling the pen, I dipped it I used it like a dip pen, and you can see usually how the feed soaks up the ink. So there is saturation there, but I don't know if that would be different if it was completely filled, if the pen was actually inked up, if you know what I mean. I have not got any scientific reason for what nib size I'm using. Maybe that will develop later when I have done more of these samples that I know what I would like to see. But right now I'm using the extra fine nib for sure all the time, and then I'm playing around with fine nibs, medium nibs, my dip pen, my glass dip pen, and then I have a Moonman dip pen that has a cap, and that I think is not glass but acrylic, and it's definitely a bit finer than the glass dip pen that I have. Yeah, sometimes a medium nib, and then I do have now own a double broad Kaweco nib, so I'm using that from now on in those samples, but I don't have that in this video. And then I also have two stub nibs, one 1.1 stub nib and one that is 1.5, and so I will alternate between those. So, what else? The chromatography that you cannot see because I'm covering it with my blotting paper. I'm trying to use a blotting paper in most of the journals that I'm using when I use fountain pens, because I just know how the writing experience changes when I'm going further down the page if I don't use it. And so I'm not even going to risk the hand oils that will then make the paper resist the ink, and then it looks splotchy, and I just don't enjoy that. And especially in an ink journal like this, where it's important that the ink saturation and the ink is applied equally, I just don't risk it. So the chromatography strip is right underneath the blotting paper on the right side, and the gradient is not very interesting. It's basically a pink gradient that gets darker before it goes into a purple, and then the top has a very, very light blue, almost turquoisey sliver, and then it stops. So there's not really that many different colors in this ink, but I have to say, very beautiful colors in this ink that make it so interesting to look at. I think what I like about this ink most is that it feels like it has some kind of depth to it that I don't see necessarily in many other inks. So this is definitely a favorite ink of mine. And that's why I purchased a bottle. And now let's go into the second part of this video. I still have about 7 minutes left, so I probably will be able to cover that topic. The controversial question is ink bottles or ink samples. And even though I purchased a full bottle of the Sailor Manyo Akebi, I actually regret buying any ink bottles in my life so far. Why, would you ask? I think, or for me, the bonus points or the plus points of using ink samples outweigh the plus points of having ink bottles by far. And so let me tell you why I chose, or I am choosing, the path of using ink samples instead of ink bottles. I am someone who loves to collect things. I have way too many things in way too many areas of my hobby life. I have yarn that I am not using. I have a fabric stash that I have reduced before I moved from Germany to here, and it's still so much I haven't used it up yet, and I probably won't be able to use it up in my lifetime. I have scrapbooking supplies that are humongous. Stickers, washi tapes, you name it, I probably have a lot of it. And I don't want to go down that same rabbit hole with inks. The reason for that is that I don't think I will ever be able to use up all the ink bottles that I have in my stash right now. And even if I was able to use them all up, I don't think any of these fountain pen inks are so amazingly beautiful that I have to have a full bottle of ink in my stash. Yes, I told you that I really love this ink, but if I had used a sample of maybe 4 milliliters or 3 milliliters, that's like 3 or 4 ink fillings, maybe 2 full piston fillers, and then it's done. And then I look at the 800 inks that are maybe the Goulet website. There's more fountain pen retailers, online retailers out there. I probably have friends who have inks who could swap with me. Um, and then I would get an ink that is maybe a little bit different, but maybe even exactly the same, as beautiful as this one. Maybe not exactly the same as I just said, but it will still be very beautiful and awesome to look at. And I wouldn't feel any guilt for buying that ink sample because I didn't have this Manyo Akebi ink looking at me and asking me why I purchased another purple ink when I have this beautiful ink in my stash. I love trying all those different colors. I love looking at their chromatography. I love comparing them. I love using them in different fountain pens and seeing how they behave differently. And by having bottles of those inks, I personally feel like I can't get more because I have so much here. And I'm also thinking about yes, I hope I will be around for a long time still. I'm 45 now. I don't want to burden my kids with all of that stuff. And also, I don't want to risk the ink going bad. All inks have a shelf life. It's not that they live forever. There's water in there. The water can evaporate. Even if your ink bottle closes very easily, you could contaminate it and it could go bad. So, yeah, if I know that I'm not using that much ink all the time, I'm not writing 500 pages every week, every day, and I'm not going through that much ink in a month, in a day, in a week, that I'm emptying this ink bottle anytime soon. So for me, the ink sample is definitely the way to go. I know that ink bottles, especially with piston filling pens and those, what are those? The vac fillers, they're easier to use, of course, because you can just dip in the nib and there's enough ink so that you can suck it up. Sometimes when there's not a lot of ink in a sample bottle, it's really hard to get that out, to get it into one of those harder filler pens. So that's definitely something to consider. And then another thing that's just for me, of course, if my friends all buy ink bottles, I never have any inks to send to them because I always get ink samples. But I just recently purchased some ink samples and gave them to a friend. I purchased colors that she liked, so I didn't have to buy a full ink bottle. It's still a lot less cost intensive getting some ink samples for someone, even if it's not sharing, but just like passing on the thing that I bought. And so I am feeling really good about the ink sample route that I'm trying to go. What are your thoughts? I would love to know. Are you team ink bottle or are you team ink sample? Let me know your reasons down below. I would love to chat with you some more. I have some more ink samples or ink journal entries on my channel. They will be hopefully in a separate playlist to be found for you. I have started a Ko-fi, so if you liked this video and you would love to support me, hop on over there, check out what I'm doing, and I'd love to see you soon. Until then, bye.